In September of 1998, I sat in a classroom for the first time at Rutgers University, Mason Gross School of the Arts, where I was pursuing my master's in acting. And I remember vividly sitting in the front row and watching this woman walk into class. She was about 4'10". She seemed fragile, stylish, decked out in a nicely tailored Chanel suit with a pair of Valentino sandals. And she walked into that room and across to her desk like she was royalty. And you could tell within seconds that this was someone that was not to be fucked with. And on that day, she began to change the entire course of my life. So today, part one of my conversation with master teacher, my mentor, Maggie Flanigan. So put the phone back in your pocket. Creating Behavior starts now. And hello, my fellow daydreamers. Happy mid-August. I hope that you are all safe and healthy and trying to figure out a way to be creative. Last week, there was this story. You might have saw it. It was a good laugh for everybody. It was that story of the Austrian tourist who was in Italy and thought it would be a good idea to sit on a piece of art, and in the process of doing that, snapped off her toes. This guy's in Italy in a museum, and there's this plaster cast statue of Pauline Bonaparte, who was the sister of Napoleon, and Napoleon commissioned this really fantastic Italian artist, Antonio Canova, back in the early 1800s to chisel his sister. And so now this plaster cast is well over 200 years old. It has survived the bombings of World War I. It has been moved to secure locations during World War II. It has survived a great deal. And this fucking guy is more concerned about getting a picture than he is about taking in the art. And so he plops his ass down on that statue, leans back in a reclining way, the way that Pauline Bonaparte is depicted there, and he snaps off her toes. Well, they finally figured out who it was, and he sends this apology, and it just got me thinking about how we just take in art. And, we've got our cameras, and, you go to a museum now, and everybody wants a selfie, and it's really more important now to get a picture of yourself in front of the Mona Lisa than actually taking it in and asking yourself, why is this a significant piece of art? And I guess, out of that, I wanted to pass along just some advice. Next time you find that we're all lucky enough to be in a museum, don't pull out your fucking phone. Just stand there and take in a piece of art. Take in. And that's what you must always be doing as actors and as artists, taking in and pondering, allowing your primitive unconscious to kind of get tapped and see what kind of associations come up to the surface when you're contemplating a significant piece of art. That's what you should be doing. Not worried about what you're going to post on your IG or on your Facebook. So, if I have anything to say, it is this. Do not take your camera out when you're in a museum, and don't sit on a fucking piece of art. Jesus. So before I turn it over to our conversation, I wanted to say a few words about Maggie. I know I've mentioned her many times over these first, dozen episodes. And, I do that because she, outside of my family, my immediate family, and Trish, certainly, is the most important relationship of my life. And, I would say outside of my parents, she has had the biggest impact on the man that I am, the person that I've become, the artist that I am. She has been a teacher. She has been a mentor. She has been tough on me when she has needed to be tough on me. She has supported me. She's encouraged me. She has championed me. And beyond just teaching me what it means to be an actor, I have relied on her to show me what it means to be a real teacher. And she is a fucking master. This is a woman with impeccable integrity. This is a woman whose character is second to none. And when she walked into a classroom, you knew that this was somebody who knew exactly what the fuck she was talking about. She was not someone to be messed with. You didn't argue with her. You didn't try to debate her. She would eviscerate you. And she would make it absolutely clear that you know nothing about acting. And what I loved about her, and she oftentimes people would say, oh, she's a fucking bitch, she's tough, she's mean, she's cruel, she'll humiliate you, she'll embarrass you. And now that I'm a teacher, I sometimes get the same response from people. And I always found that the students that felt that way about her were the ones that were unwilling to accept the fact that they were actually lazy and did not work hard and had skated by most of their life on their personality, their looks, and their bullshit. And then you walked into this woman's class, and she called you on it. And she challenged you to answer a couple of questions for yourself every single day. The first one was, why is your second best okay? Why do you look at the work that you are preparing for class and say to yourself, this'll do? And she made it really clear to all of us that the way you worked in her classroom was the way you were going to work professionally. And if you showed up late, if you didn't do your work, if it was sloppy, if you just slapped shit together, you were a hack. And she forced you to reckon with that. How hard are you willing to work? And, how serious are you if this is really something you say you want to be doing for the rest of your life? And she had a bullshit detector that just was an inviolate sense of truth. And I will remember the tough things she said to me in that classroom. I'll remember the compliments she paid me in that classroom for the rest of my life. I could quote you verbatim some of the things that she said to me. It meant so much. And I'm just privileged here to let you in on some of our conversation. I was up at her house with her husband, Richard, Trish, and I for my 50th birthday back in July, and we recorded a couple of hours. So let's just get to it. Here's part one of my talk with Maggie. Well, Maggie, hello. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm in your house. I mean, It's always a beautiful place to be.
Oh, thank you.
Up here in South Dartmouth, Massachusetts.
Yes, yeah.
With the chickens. We might hear chickens
sound, yeah. They're
crowing.
not talking and crowing out of key.
Yeah, because you have chickens, you've got 2 dogs.
And a husband.
And a husband. That's right, Richard. And it's beautiful up here, and we're up here for the 4th of July, and so this is the perfect time to have a conversation with you.
Yeah. I'm very talkative, right? I give you a one-word answer.
No, this is just perfect. Well, I guess first off, I'll just say that you are one of the most important people in my life. You've certainly had a hand in shaping me as a man and as an artist and as a human being and as a teacher. I pretty much owe my entire artistic life to your generosity.
Well, you worked very hard, and you were very open, and still are, Well, and I appreciate that, and it was a joy to work with you, and still is.
So I'm curious about finding out more about you here. You were born in Columbia, South Carolina?
No, I was born in Shamley, Georgia.
Oh, and you moved to South Carolina.
Yeah, when I was probably 2 or 3, my parents moved to Columbia, South Carolina.
And you lived there your whole childhood?
I grew up there and left when I was going to college.
Well, what was it like growing up in South Carolina in the 50s, 60s?
It was okay.
It was okay.
Yeah.
But you wanted to get out.
Yes, as I got older, given what I wanted to do and to grow as a person, although I don't think I thought of I'm going to grow as a person, but I knew I had to get out because I was an only child, and I wanted things, although it was scary going to college. And
Well, what did you want?
I wanted to be an actor. I really wanted to be an actress. And I did, a few things in high school, but I just knew I wanted to be an actress. And when I went to college, when I was a freshman, I got the lead in, oh God, what's the name of it? The Good Woman of Setsuwan. And I played 2 parts, Shante and Shuita. And I did very well in it. I got a standing ovation, which I did not go out and accept because I didn't think I was good enough.
Too humble.
Right. And when I first got the part, I went up to the director and said, "Now, what method are we using? I mean, is it Stanislavski?" And and it was like, wow, he must thought I was a pretentious little girl.
Well, when did you know that you wanted to be an actor? Like,
Very
what drew
young. Around 5, 6, 7, And then when I got older, I would watch soap operas sometimes, and I thought, well, I can do that.
But were you going to the movies as a kid
Well, it depended on whether my mother would take me, and sometimes I'd sneak out to see a movie with a friend in the neighborhood. Oh, I was severely punished for not asking if I could do it.
So you had a strict mother?
Very strict. Very, very strict. Very protective, and was very, there was reasons to be concerned about me,
What were those reasons?
One primarily was I was epileptic. I developed epilepsy, which I only had at night and when I was sleeping or waking up in the morning. And she was very protective.
Would you wake up to a seizure?
Sometimes, yeah. Or
That's
coming
scary.
out of a seizure, So
So she was worried about you more than
Oh,
anything.
goodness. She moved into my bedroom and slept in the same bed with me. And then I would have a seizure and she wouldn't wake up. So.
Did they have medicine and things?
Yeah, I
then?
took phenobarbital and Dilantin for it. And then I took it for quite a while. And then when I was in high school, they began to remove it. And what happened? I can't remember what happened to me physically. I must have had withdrawal in high school and didn't really understand it, or felt that something was wrong with me. But I wasn't. I got addicted. When they took it away from me in late high school, I was kind of having withdrawal. I was, I wasn't hallucinating, but I was very hard to sleep.
So that was a challenging childhood, because you have scoliosis. You were born with...
Right, with scoliosis. I was born with not a club foot, but a difficult foot that could drag a little bit. I don't think people would see that now, but...
Did it feel big to you? Like Laura Wingfield?
Didn't feel big, it just was ugly. And then when I was a kid, with other kids around, because I didn't feel in the foot, I would stick pins in it and show them, not very far, but, and I would show them what, I couldn't feel
Because you have no feeling in your right foot.
I have, I don't. No, some on the top of my foot, but not on the bottom. You know.
Well, how did you...
And I took ballet, for a number of years as a kid. And then when, there would be two people, that they would put in the front to help them, other kids, know what to do. And I was one of them. And then they put the girls on point, and I couldn't do it. They wouldn't let me do it because they were afraid I'd hurt myself. And that was a very smart thing. But I was very disappointed and became very not responsive.
Right.
My mother said I didn't practice, but I was young, and I would get together with a cousin and someone else, and when they'd come over, I would choreograph dances, and that's what we did. We danced, and I choreographed it as well as be part of it. And when I wanted to go back to dance to ballet when I was in high school, and my mother wouldn't pay for it. And then when I went to college, I worked very hard in a ballet class. Mavis Ray was the teacher, and she had retired down in Greenville, North Carolina, and she had been Agnes DeMille's assistant in Oklahoma and in a number of Broadway musicals. And I worked very hard with her. And she said once, you'd be a dancer if you had a right foot just like your left foot. Well, that was kind of comforting. But I always danced, and when I was a sophomore I moved to East Carolina University because supposedly they had a very good theater department there. And I got cast a lot. I didn't know what I was doing, but I did get cast a lot and did well. She said, "Boy, you've really got something," And I thought, "Oh, good," But we had the head of the department and the head of acting was abusive. He had come from the Actors Studio. He and his wife came from the Actors Studio. And this man was really abusive. He would scream at you and, you're like 20, and to have someone scream at you and not know what you're doing or how to correct it was scary. And eventually, after I was there in my junior year, I changed majors to philosophy and English because I just couldn't tolerate that kind of abuse. And what he was teaching from Strasbourg did not make sense to me, and I thought I was untalented. But if you tried to take the work to text, I don't know how you take it, given song and dance. That I could do, song and dance. I didn't like sense memory. I didn't like, sense memory is okay, but emotional memory, I didn't like that.
When did you first hear of Meisner? When did you first hear about Meisner? When you moved to New York?
There was an actor that would come down for summer theater named Greg Zittel, who was a really talented actor, and he worked with Sandy Meisner. And I wanted to be an actor. And he said, "Well, you're too quiet to be an actor." And but I was determined. I wasn't going to have someone tell me I was too quiet, because I knew that inside I wasn't.
I mean, because you were shy as a person, you were
saying.
I'm
a very shy person.
You
and
are.
Very sensitive. So, because your voice isn't loud enough, you'll never be able to speak on stage. But,
Well, how did you respond when you heard criticism like that? Fuck you?
Well, I developed fuck you, as I went on. But it wasn't fuck you. It was like, well, I know I can do this. I know it. I was not going to be told that I couldn't do it. And I fought for myself internally. That is how I dealt with it.
What's that mean, to fight with yourself internally?
Well, I fought against them internally by saying to myself, I can do this. I may not be able to do it now, but I do have a strong voice. That's how I said it to myself.
Well, when did you move to New York?
1972.
And was that right out of undergrad?
Yep.
Did you know all along that that's what you were going to do? Or how did you get to that place where you're like, I'm going to move to New York? And
I wanted to be an actress, and I knew that I had to train in New York, because I didn't get trained in my school where I graduated.
But did you feel, most people, they get out of undergrad and they think, oh, I'm trained, and they, they never study again.
No,
right?
I didn't feel trained, because I knew that I didn't know what I was doing.
You mean when you get a script, you're like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing here with this?
No, I didn't. I knew that I could have conversational reality, which I didn't, of course, know that term, but I knew I had reality. I wasn't somebody acting or pushing. I remember one time there was the big actor on campus, and I was doing a scene with him in a play called USA, and he was doing so much acting, and I'm kind of standing there looking, going, Jesus Christ, what the well, I didn't say what the fuck, but what's he doing? And I almost started laughing, but that I was out of character then. And I played Janie Williams, and I played Isadora Duncan, and you have like this a huge monologue that goes on for pages, and I didn't quite know what to do with it. I didn't know what actions were, and he didn't teach that, and then would yell at you if you weren't doing it, and it was just an awful experience. How do I know what to do if I'm not trained what to do?
So, when you came to New York in '72, did you know anybody? Did you move with anybody? Were
No.
you completely by yourself?
I moved. I came on a bus, a Greyhound bus. My parents were, of course, really scared for me, and rightly so, because I was going up alone. And I was going to stay with a friend of mine's friend. And I'd gone to New York once before for the summer, and spent the summer there, went to Broadway shows and everything, and knew my way around, walked everywhere. Would walk, from 110th Street down to the Village, and go see plays. And I could tell what was good and wasn't. I didn't know why, but I could tell when somebody was indicating and somebody else had nice reality.
Did you have a lot of survival jobs?
I did.
Did you wait tables?
Oh, no, I was a terrible waitress. I went to something called the Riverboat, which I think became the Pyramid Club. I'm not quite sure about that, but and I only lasted one night. I went because I thought I could get out of day jobs and make money like other actors, and I didn't know anything about drinks, and there were very few people in the bar, and I would go to the couple and say. They would say "doers on the rocks," and I go, "Oh, how do you do that phonetically?" That I lasted, to the end of the evening, and the guy said, "You don't come back."
Well, so how did you survive? How did you pay your bills? What were you?
I worked in an office, which I hated, really hated, and would read, with papers over it, so I looked like I was working. But I would read. I read a lot, so that's what I'd do. And I'd get fired. I'd go to the next job, and same thing would happen.
Well, so how did you find Bill Esper? How did you end up training with him?
When I met Greg Zittel, he was studying with Sandy Meisner, and he talked about the neighborhood playhouse. He didn't work at the neighborhood playhouse, but Sandy did, but not Greg. I went to New York to study with Sandy, and I was looked much younger than I was. And Sandy said, "How old are you?" "You're 12." And I said, "No, Mr. Meisner, I'm 21, And he said, "You're too young, you're too inexperienced, because most of the students there are working on Broadway or, doing a lot of film." And then somebody in the class said, "Well, you know who the best teacher is? That's Bill Esper. He's supposedly the best teacher, even better than Meisner." And so then I sought him out, and he accepted me in class. And I was very scared because it was New York City, and you're scared you won't do well, do you know? But I did it, and I stayed in there, and I was very shy with the repetition. But after a while, it really opened me up. And I did very well in first year and in second year because of my talent. Now, I'm not bragging about it. Excuse me. But the work is so good. It's so elemental for actors. And it just teaches in a very logical way. But it's not logical in the head. It's logical in the heart and in the soul, and to your actor's way of thinking. Not the normal person. I hate to say normal, but not the everyday person who thinks logically or however they think. You can't do that when you're acting. You got to think from your heart and your guts.
Did you struggle? Our students, the struggle is real. And, did you ever feel like you wanted to quit? Or
I had the hardest time. No, I never did. Ever. I was going to do it, even though I may feel really bad about it or bad about the work. Never would I have quit, ever. And I worked very hard. And I began to open up with the independent activity because it made so much sense, And that's how I began to open up. And I did a lot of very good activities. And the door work was hard for me. But from working in the independent activity, I was able to open up at the door. But that was the hardest because you had nothing to do but just be really open,
So you did the 2 years with Bill?
Yep.
At his studio, not at Neighborhood Playhouse?
No, I worked at his studio because I didn't have the money to go to Neighborhood Playhouse. And I'm glad I went to and studied with Bill.
What was Bill like as a teacher?
He was funny. He could be strong and difficult with you, and he had a temper. But I learned from him, and I certainly learned more from him than I did with the other teacher. And I was only there for a couple of months. And then I went to Bill's studio, and he got me, and I grew tremendously there. And then in second year, I understood character work intuitively. And he gave me in first year, at the end of first year, a character scene. And I understood it because the girl was like a bad seed, like the movie The Bad Seed. And I thought, well, I understand that. That's who I am, or was as a kid. So I was able to catch it, without knowing how I did it. And that was an honor that he gave me a character scene and expected me to do it in first year. And I did it, not knowing how I did it,
So then you get out of school, and did you just start auditioning and trying to...
Well, after second year, which I did do very well in, and then I started auditioning,
And what was that like?
Well, I thought I did well, and I think I did. I didn't always get cast, but I knew how to do monologues. I knew how to cold read, although there was no cold read teaching, but you learned how to implant meanings. So I knew how to work it out, and I did pretty well in it.
Well, when did you start to follow Bill as a teacher, and how did you get to that point in your life where you thought, I think I like teaching and want to teach the work?
Well, I was very interested in the Meisner work. I saw how brilliant it was and saw how the inevitable logic of it was, not intellectual logic, but visceral logic. And I was interested in the form of it and would take notes on it. If you looked at my notes now, you'd go, that doesn't make sense. But I was interested in the form and the development of it and how it opened up an actor and how it taught you to craft. And I think it's like brilliant in terms of the development of it for actors. And then Bill said that I would work as an ingenue and then I wouldn't work for a long time. And then when I'm older, I would work, but more like when I was in my 60s and 70s. You'll be a crotchety old, he thought that's when I would work as an ingenue and then not for a long time. And I didn't know I was comedic, but I did have a feeling for certain comedic parts.
Well, how did you... I mean, you didn't come to New York thinking you were going to be a teacher.
No. I wasn't working as an actress for a number of years, and so I thought I would be a good teacher.
Why do you think that?
Because I thought I understood the technique. Not to teach, I knew I would have to train, and so I approached Bill about teaching, and he said, "Oh, no, your voice isn't loud enough, same thing." And he said, "No, you couldn't command a room, And I said, "Yes, I can. I was a manager of an art gallery. I can do that." And he was, he said, "Well, I'll think about it." And I kept calling him. I wasn't going to take a no for an answer. I just wasn't.
So he said no first?
He said, "I'll think about it." Didn't think I was, thought I was too shy to do it or be able to, as I said, to command a class, to command a room. And I said, "Yes, I will. I can, and I will. And I'm not going to take no for an answer." And it,
Did you keep hounding him?
Yeah, yes, I did. "Have you made a decision, Bill?" "You haven't." "Well, I'm going to call you in another month, And I did, and he took me in.
And so you start watching his class?
I started watching the class as a soon-to-be teacher and took very clear notes and would go home. And
your notebooks are incredible. I mean,
yeah.
How many notebooks do you think
About
you have
20.
up there? 20
books.
Single-space typed?
Single-space, front and back typed. But I took very good notes, and then I would go home at night and type everything up. And I did that for, 4 or 5 years.
Of watching him in his class, first year,
Right.
second year.
And coaching. And he would have me coach first and second year. But a teacher there quit and opened her own studio.
Is that Catherine Gately?
Yeah, Catherine Gately. And Bill needed a teacher for first year. So having only started, I started teaching first year in like September and October of my first year watching. I had just started. And he also had me do second year as well. So I was teaching first and second year by September and October of my first year watching Bill.
Where do you think your work ethic comes from? Because you work harder and have a higher bar for work and for self-discipline than anyone I know. So where did that come from?
It came from my parents, my mother. She said, "You're not that bright. You'll have to work harder than anyone else in order to get somewhere." And I did. I worked very hard in school. I worked very hard in acting class and in teaching. I sat, as everyone had to do, and watch him teach. And I would sit back there and began to internally respond to what was going on and then check to see what he said. And that's how I began to learn, was to see what my response was and what his response was. So, and that's how I learned where I was off or where I was right. You know.
So you would kind of teach internally while you were sitting there watching?
Yes, I did, and took a lot of notes that other teachers who were sitting there didn't take as much notes. Doesn't mean they didn't absorb it, they did. But I did it through that. So that, and I would write in my notes when I was teaching, oh no, I said this, I thought this, he said that, and would make it my own over a number of years, and clarify it. It was, and that's what I began to do in maybe the second year watching and teaching, was clarifying what he was saying so that it was clear to the students.
What did you think, that he wasn't as clear as he could have been?
I think there was more confusion than needed to be. But that was his way of teaching, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I wanted to be clear for myself and clear for students, because if students aren't clear, how are they going to grow?
So what was it like to start to walk into a classroom being told that you're too shy and you don't have a voice?
Oh, no, I was very prepared. That I was with him only for 2 months before I started teaching. And I prepared fully so that I knew what I would say. And I did, and I just improvised off them. And would go home and then figure out what I could have done better. And then I'd go back in and the next class and work off them better, be more clear, and go back home and evaluate what I did.
Well, how did it feel leaving a class? How did that compare to being in rehearsal or being on stage and working as an actor? How did you find yourself satiated creatively as a teacher?
God, you have, 20 actors in a classroom first year, second year, and you want to help them. You want to be as clear as possible, be supportive as possible. Although some actors would say I wasn't supportive, but it was important for me to have discipline and teach them discipline, because some actors are just not disciplined. Many of them aren't.
Lazy.
They're lazy, but they've not been taught how hard it is and how they must work, and the clarity that a teacher must offer to students. If they're not clear, then the students will be unclear. They can't be clearer than the teacher who's teaching.
So you ended up working for Bill and teaching for him for almost 20 years.
Yeah, I think it's 19.
19 years.
Yeah.
At his studio in New York City.
And at Rutgers University.
And at the MFA program in Rutgers, where
Right.
I met you, and that's where I trained with you.
Right.
In 1988.
I did that in the spring of 1983. I came in to teach. I came in to study as a teacher in 82, which he had me teach. And then in 83, I was still teaching at the studio, and he brought me into Rutgers. So I started teaching at Rutgers in my first year, watching him.
Right, so you were going back and forth between the city and New Brunswick,
Right.
and basically
home.
two full-time jobs for
Yes.
19 years.
Yes, that's right.
What was the difference between teaching at Rutgers at an MFA program and teaching in the city? Was there a big difference?
At Rutgers, the students had been vetted, because they had to audition, they had to go through interviews, and at Bill's studio, you went through interviews, and you were trying to fill your class, so you would try to be as selective as possible, and sometimes you couldn't be so selective.
But not as selective as it is for an MFA program.
Yes, and then an MFA program, there are grades, you're evaluated every semester.
Right.
so it's a tough program, but it was a very, very good professional training program for actors, and that's what Bill really created, that you can't quite do in the city. But he had very good students in the city. I think there were some very talented, successful actors that were trained well and then went out in the business and worked.
So 19 years, you get to 2000, 2001. You left Rutgers in 99, but you were still teaching for Bill at his studio in New York City.
Right.
Well, talk to me about how you started to think about why I want my own studio. I want my name on the wall, and I want to do things the way I want to.
I didn't think about my name on the wall. I thought that I had been with Bill for a long time and had been a good support for him as well as a good teacher. I thought I was a good teacher, and I just felt that I needed to grow more, because after a while you kind of...
Did you feel stagnant?
I was beginning to feel, after about 19 years, that I wanted to have my own studio. And in fact, what it was is to go on my own and see how I would do, because it was frightening.
That's scary.
It's very scary. You may not get any students. You may be bad-mouthed.
Well, also you knew that Bill was not going to take kindly to you
right. Well,
leaving him and opening up.
Yeah, and he didn't. But on some level, I think he's proud of me. I really do.
Well, so what was that like to... I mean, did you have to walk into his office and say, "Listen, I'm leaving you, and I'm going to open up my own studio"?
Well, I did. I asked to meet with him. He was he was getting ready to go in class, which was not a great time to tell him. And he was very angry and upset. And then he had to go in and teach. But Eric Ostro, who was also a Rutgers graduate, he helped me find a space, and get everything set up. And then I opened it, and it was terrifying, because you never know. You're there by yourself. You're standing on your own. If it fails, you failed, and that was just terrifying. I did everything I could to get students, and
well, you also opened in September of 2001. So September 11th happened.
The summer intensive of 2001. I had a small summer intensive, maybe about 14 people, which was pretty good. And then I opened in the fall, and I had you wouldn't believe, I had like 20 people.
That's amazing. And then 9/11 happened that fall too.
Yeah, not even before I started teaching, it happened, and I was driving into the city when the first plane hit, and I somehow got to the studio, had interviews, but only one person showed up, and I told this person to go home and take care of themselves. And
it's a huge trauma to deal with opening a studio like that. But you made it work. I mean, you opened your studio in 2001, and I mean, it's still going today.
Yes.
Almost 20 years later, and
thanks to you, you bought the studio and have grown it in a very good way.
Yeah, it's I think it's as close to what a conservatory program can be,
right,
an MFA
in New York
program
City.
in New York, right?
That's what I wanted. I wanted a studio that I could get as close to the training program at Rutgers, because it was an excellent program. And it's harder in New York because of they've got to make a living, which people had to do that at Rutgers, but they had to do all kinds of classes that you can't quite get everything in. I tried to get the teachers, and they did come along.
Yeah, they did. And you ran that studio, and it kept growing, and I bought the studio in 2012, and then you ended up starting to think about retirement, and
Yes.
you know, I know that was difficult for you. What was it like to start to contemplate not teaching anymore?
Uh, well, I was contemplating. I just knew that I couldn't continue teaching a full-time job at Rutgers during the day and a full-time teaching schedule at night. It was, when I first started doing it, and even later on, I had a lot of energy and loved it. But as time went on, you know, right before I sold it to you, it was hard. I was exhausted. I'd get up at 5 or 6 in the morning, drive into the city, and be there, prepared, ready to teach, to coaching before the class began, and then teach first year, 3 first-year classes.
Yeah, you'd have
in
9
one
hours of
day.
teaching in a
Yeah.
day.
And the next day, 9 hours of second year. And then you're running the studio at the same time, which was after, 2001, coming into 2010, 2009. It was backbreaking. And I didn't think I was teaching as well. I was teaching, I was good, but I was tired, and I would get irritated with students. Some would say I would get angry, which I did.
You? Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Of course. Well, it was funny you say that, because for someone who is shy and quiet, you command a room in a way that I've never seen anybody do it.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, I wouldn't know that, but...
You really, you don't know, like, when you walk in, that like you have this presence and like you this command.
Well, I know that I go in fully prepared and fully open, and making clear to them that I'm not playing around.
Right.
That I'm the real deal, and what I'm going to teach is the real deal, and they better work their ass off, or they'll
Right.
have a very hard time with me.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, because there's one thing you can't tolerate is laziness.
Can't. Or people who argue back,
Right.
and think they're going to defend themselves about what I just said.
Did you always have that kind of toughness, even when you were younger, or did you develop that?
No, because I think inside I made it tough for myself so that I would be good. I kept myself to a certain standard. And as a teacher, it was always about being the best teacher, the clearest teacher that I could possibly be, because if the teacher is not clear, it's very hard for students to fully get the work.
So what's it like now to, not be teaching every day and to have this beautiful home up here? And do you miss it? Do you miss being in the classroom?
Yeah, I miss, that's why I began the master class, because it was a way of teaching that was not the rigorous teaching in the 2-year program. And I loved working with people who already knew how to work, although sometimes master class, if you're not working with people you trained, it may be more difficult. Or if another good teacher trained, then it's more difficult. But I struggled to teach with people who were not trained well or were lazy. I tried, unless somebody was really lazy, and I'd give them a hard time.
What do you love about acting?
About acting?
Yeah.
Well, I just love the possibility of creating a part, from yourself, even though the character may not be like you in every aspect. A really talented actor can find a way into it. And it was just wonderful when I was acting to create a character. I mean, I'm a character actress. I'm not a leading lady. I'm a character actress. And I just thought that was the most wonderful thing in the world, is to find your way into a character, partly from yourself and a lot from your imagination. And when I'd work on a part, I would keep a notebook by my bed. And when I was going to sleep, I would daydream, really be open and daydream. And things came to me that were very specific to the character. And I would sit down, I would have a notebook by the bed and would write down what was coming to me from my imagination. And it was oftentimes things you'd never have thought with your head. And but character acting is just to find a part in you, to bring yourself to a part, live and breathe the part, and to breathe life into the part, I thought was wonderful. And just to create a character from yourself that's different than you.
Well, my fellow daydreamers, she's quite a special person. I want to thank you for sticking around and keeping your phone in your pocket. Please follow, subscribe to this show wherever you get your podcasts. You can go to our website, creatingbehaviorpodcast.com. I use SpeakPipe, so all you got to do is press a button, leave me a message, ask me a question, leave a comment. Let me hear an opinion or two that you have to share. You can follow us on IG at Creating Behavior. You can follow the Maggie Flanigan Studio as well at Maggie Flanigan Studio. Lawrence Trailer, thank you for the music as always. My friends, be disruptive. Play full out with yourself. And don't ever settle for your second best. My name is Charlie Sandlan. Peace.